Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Menlo Park Fire Protection District regular board meeting, September 17th, 2024. It is 7:02, and we are starting the meeting with the roll.
Director Duncan.
Present.
Director Jones.
Here.
Director Crowley. Present. Director Solano.
Here.
Director Blenheim.
Here. Okay, and the pledge of allegiance. Get out of their chairs. Sheldon, turn around, and we're good. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic which stands one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we did have a closed session of the board this evening, and we have one reportable item from the closed session. And that is that the board has unanimously consented to sunshine the side letter with IAFF Local 2400 District 10 for the new paramedic training pilot program. The board directed the proposed side letter be placed on the district website for public review until the board considers approval of the side letter at its next regular scheduled meeting, which is October 15th of 2024. And we will ask if there's any public comment. One person to look at tonight. Okay, so from there, we will move on to chief's report.
Yeah. Director Bloom, members of the board, our people that are here today, and anyone that's watching on Zoom. Happy to share with you the fire chief's report for activities that have occurred over the last month. Very quickly, there's not a lot to update you on the Station 1 design. I did include an attachment that just shows you the current state of the project. We haven't changed anything on the outside. And on those very busy schematics there, the only thing that's changed that I had noticed that we talked about was there's some diagonal parking on there instead of some straight on parking. But really the purpose of this was just give you an update, and I know there had been some conversation at the last board meeting about what's going on, so status quo as we move slowly through the city of Menlo Park processes with their planning department, so that was the purpose of that.
Yes, Chief, could you explain the difference between the brown part and the blue part?
Yeah. I can't tell you, that's right, Phil, I don't know if you know, but
I didn't hear
on
that.
the brown and blue on the schematic for the,
What was
I'm not sure why they highlighted.
Oh, so the highlighted areas, a couple of the highlighted areas over along the street was the possibility of us having to change the way the vegetation is, the bushes and trees. The board had talked about trees along Santa Monica Avenue. And there's some restrictions on that. And what all these highlighted areas are, I forget what John referred to them as, but they are areas where water can soak into the ground and where water would collect, which makes landscaping them a little bit more difficult.
And now it's
Swales?
the
Is
bioswales.
this bioswales? That I wasn't gonna guess the term, but.
Update on the community engagement unit. We've been busy over the last month, some things that have happened. In July and August and September, we participated in the Menlo College Club and Community Fair with an education group. Attended the Menlo Park City Council meeting to join in receiving emergency preparedness proclamation. I taught a number of Red Cross Ready, Stop the Bleed, and First Aid CPR classes. Heather also attended the National Strip Conference in Washington, D.C. We participated in the San Mateo County Disaster Prep Day with a CERT booth and heavy rescue equipment. And I think I shared that we hosted a community get together here for our community groups, and our CERT team and had Mr. Soft here. So also going on, we had our fire marshal pop-up at the St. Francis Center over in North Fair Oaks. It was lightly attended, but still valued. Strategic plan update, that's coming up. We have really in October. We have surveys going out to members of the public, to also partner agencies now with fire and law enforcement. also to some, actually, all of our employees. We are also sending out surveys, basically customer service surveys to everyone who we responded to an emergency at their residence or business for I believe it's the last 6 months or year. So we get some really great feedback on how we're performing out there too, which is great. Current deployments, our engine that we had deployed is returning today. They're probably still not back. They were deployed out on September 8th, originally to the Davis fire. That was a fire between Reno and Carson, just over the state line. And then they were reassigned down to the airport fire down in Orange County, and that's the one that they're driving back from today. That was engine 104 that went out with 4 of our members. With them coming back today, we won't have any resources deployed. The fire response analysis report is attached. I just provided you, I was reviewing it yesterday and noticed that the graph was off. And so this is a corrected graph that shows accurately that our EMS calls are 59%, not 28.4% as previously reported. So that's just a correction from the record. We had the chili cook-off on August 24th, as we normally do. Menlo Park got the award for the best booth and also for the People's Choice with the best chili, which is the vote that matters the most. And you do that by how many people you go around and taste, and then you actually have a ticket, for your entrance. You give it to the booth where you like the chili the best, and you get a full cup of chili. So we crushed everybody on that one. The judge's choice always, I think it's fixed, went to some other agency.
I agree with you on that, Mark.
Right?
I agree.
Yeah, I'm like, what? How's that possible? But the people love us and the judges, but.
If you win the judges award next year, then it's not right.
That's right.
We never used to win that.
Just, yeah, that's what I'm learning. But we did great. And our chili was awesome. I attended on August 27th, a virtual preparedness town hall with Congressman Mullen and also Bob Fenton, who's currently the FEMA Region 9 Administrator. He was for a while the acting director of FEMA when there was some transition. He also happens to be the monkeypox czar for the United States, interesting enough. But anyway, that wasn't the purpose of it. It was really to have some conversations with constituents in Congressman Mullen's district about preparedness and what we can do. Whatever it's related to, earthquake safety, fire safety, just a wide variety of things. Good hour-long conversation that was moderated. It was very professionally done. It's up and available for view through Congressman Mullen's website. It's posted up on YouTube. I put down the Menlo Park City Council proclamation just this last Tuesday. I attended along with John Johnston and Heather and a number of our CERT folks. Really great showing. And the council recognized National Preparedness Month and did it by presenting the proclamation to MPC Ray folks and our CERT folks. That was a nice event. The ALS-JPA Management Committee, I know they canceled the regular quarterly meeting of the ALS-JPA for lack of agenda items was, I think, the purpose, but we still had a management committee meeting where we discussed a projected 5-year budget. And that was related to a CalPERS issue they're trying to resolve where the employees of the ALS-JPA, I think, had been lumped under Daly City's PERS account. And we got a legal ruling that can't happen. So we're trying to get PERS liability and the issues transferred over to the ALS-JPA, which necessitated a projected 5-year budget. But that was basically the essence of what we met for. Fire Chief Zoom, I do this quarterly. I did this last Thursday morning. Yeah, generally it just it's a district-wide thing and we record it. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, whether it's rumor control, gives me an opportunity to share what's going on. I found more often than not, I don't get asked very many questions. So I come with kind of a list of things to talk about. Chatted a little bit just at the beginning of it, about people being sensitive of the political environment with the elections coming up and just having a kind of some situational awareness when it relates to being at work. You know, we're locked in the fire station with each other for 48 hours, and we may not be all the same political persuasion. So basically, it was just asking people to be sensitive to that, and making sure that everybody felt included, and didn't tell them they couldn't watch certain news networks or others, but that just they should have a certain awareness so that and it's a good day to not talk about politics if there's mixed company, so to speak. So I think that was well received. Then I also attended the San Mateo County Public Safety Memorial. It's an annual memorial that we do to recognize those that have retirees that have passed away in the last year. We had one name, that was Jeff Smith. And then we have 3 names that we recognize every year for line of duty deaths. So nice memorial, well attended. And outstanding staff reports is the ISO review that we're targeting for November. And that concludes my report.
Steve, I had a question, maybe 2, main clarification. On the incident report, I know you gave us the updated one, but I wrote all my notes on one that was in the packet. For point of clarification, I noticed on the, where it says fire alarm, this is on page 11.
Sure.
And it says that the number called was 479. Oh, the false alarm was up 479. What is considered false alarm call? And how do they get into the system?
First of all, let me just check and see. The false alarm calls changed to 672 in the updated one. Those might be a call where somebody hears an accident and we respond and there's no accident, it's clear. It could be somebody sees what they think is smoke coming from somebody's home. It ends up being a barbecue fire in the backyard. It's gonna be things like that. It's also, we get called pretty frequently to different alarms going off at big businesses. The VA is a frequent flyer, and usually it's just, the systems are finicky and we get lots of false alarms in those fire alarm systems. So that's probably the majority of them.
There's three other areas of clarification we like to moving right below that. I guess it says fire. I guess 42 number calls of 42. And then below that it had good intention. What are good intention? What is the definition for good intention call? And really, after getting an understanding, how do they get into the system as well?
Oh, okay, so all of these get into the system by somebody dialing 911.
Okay, that's first.
So that's how all, unless we happen to drive up on it. Yeah, so, that's how they get in. The good intent calls could be, trying to think off the top of my head. I don't, I'll get back.
Okay, yeah, because the other two kind of relates to, and ask the question, how did that get into the system? The other one was, there was almost.
Phone a friend.
Okay. I was a guy, that's great.
It said maybe tone is power lines down, but upon arrival, it might be telephone or communication lines, so it's not a hazard. That's one example. I'll get you more information, but that's an example.
All right, so the last question I wanted, we talked about other calls. And and other calls, it seems like it's about, if the numbers haven't changed, about 3,500 other calls, other calls on this one, okay, it dropped
It's
down.
dropped down.
Yeah.
139.
That's what,
Immaterial.
yes, that's what, I will have to also get an example of what those are, but obviously it's a much smaller number.
Okay.
So I'll give you, at next month's meeting, I'll come back and share with you what examples are of those.
Okay,
Does that work?
that would be great, because it leads into, one of the items that we got on the agenda later on, well, I won't go into it, but it leads into that. The electric vehicle piece of it, in terms of, it seems like we're wasting a lot of gas time going to certain calls. Engine wise, I mean, you like diesel fuel and how if that can be substituted with something maybe less costly, you know, in terms of vehicle, you know, you can think of that, and we'll talk about it more. And also, the last thing is, do you have these broken out by cities as well?
Yes, they are in that bar chart.
Yeah,
Below?
It's by color.
Like,
Yeah,
okay.
it's broken out in the three cities, the county area, and then the other thing is our auto aid that's given to other jurisdictions.
Okay. So this pie chart is also broken down by that.
It's not broken down by city. You know, we certainly could dive down into that in a future report. And for each of the cities, provide a pie chart that shows, you know, for example, of the 2,397, sorry, over here it changed, 2,782 calls that we went on to Menlo Park, what percentage of those were EMS calls? We could do that. We don't currently.
That would be helpful, and again, lead back into the other thing that we talked about when we get to the chamber. Just kind of understand how that works in the cities.
Where does the cat getting rescued from a car fall into it? Which was in the newspaper last week.
Oh, I don't know. That might be another.
Good intent.
Good intent. Oh, Chuck, you didn't have to answer that. Go ahead, Chuck.
I wanted to follow up on Robert's. I have looked at the old one here too, but it turns out to be the same in both. About 10% of our calls are auto aid calls. According to the bar chart there, the colored chart. So if I'm understanding this correctly, there were 1,191 calls out of 11,100, so roughly 10%. Is there a way for us to know how often auto aid comes to us?
Well, I was just gonna ask,
So-
does that include that, like the North Fair Oaks fire, right?
So the aid given and received kind of things. So sure, we can mine the data out and share that with the board.
Well, I mean, this is kind of an old theme for me, but I don't know if it's still current. That is that we are a net exporter of aid, and that it's really unfair to our ratepayers to be subsidizing what other agencies, particularly the county, is not doing. So,
Our auto aid is generally given more to Redwood City and Woodside
The neighboring.
and probably Fremont. I think we have mutual interest with them, but yeah, that's generally where
if
it's
you
going.
could, I would just like to know, how should I say, the differential was substantial. When we looked at it before, for every 100 calls that we sent out, we only got about 25, so it was way lopsided.
I could create some data related to that. I think the last time I looked was about 2 to 1. 2 calls of aid given to 1 call received.
Oh.
Was the last time, but I'll get an updated.
But auto aid's really one portion of the mutual aid system, right? One is it happens automatically, the second one is it happens on multiple alarm
But
fires.
the calls would be counted the same, right? I mean, if we went to another outside agency, it would still be in that
Well,
category.
sure. I mean, the 2,700 Middlefield obviously would be 1 call of auto aid received where, obviously it was, the aid we received was.
No, but
quite
to
a
his
year
point,
worth of
A year or two.
resources.
to his point, you're not counting auto versus mutual as separate.
No, we're going, We don't track the mutual aid stuff. Usually that is when we send resources out of county, not
Oh, mutual aid is only when you send them out? of county?
generally.
But it used to be that Palo Alto, for example, was considered mutual because we weren't allowed to have auto aid or, in other words, there were some distinctions made.
It would be if we made a mutual aid request during the 2700 Middlefield fire. For Palo Alto to come in and they covered East Palo Alto. We also made a request for 10 mutual aid engines from Santa Clara County during that fire. So automatic aid gets dinged out of our.
Your resident historian.
We're pretty far afield from the agenda of the fire chief's report, just
Yeah.
a comment for you.
Okay.
All-
Go ahead, provide.
All automatic aid is mutual aid, automatic aid is a higher form of mutual aid. So automatic aid is mutual aid that you cannot say no to. There's an agreement between our agency and the county agencies that we will automatically send aid if they request it. In mutual aid, you can say no. So in the older Palo Alto agreements, the frustration for our Menlo Park firefighters were we would ask for Palo Alto 3 to come into our jurisdiction, and they would say no because they have mutual aid. But Grove City would never say no because we have automatic aid, but it's all,
It can.
it's a higher level. of
Well, it's
mutual aid.
automatic.
Okay, so on that note of clarification, we're gonna move on. We'll take council's lead on this, that we're off topic. You know, what I would tell board members is feel free to reach out privately to the chief if there's different slices of data. What I've found in my experience is everyone wants to see data in a different slice. And in this case, we have a big data set. Some of those can be satisfied just on a one-on-one basis. But I don't want to confuse the public on kind of convoluting our reporting so much that you have so much data and you can't read it. So I think we've threaded the needle to give people a good perspective. So I would just encourage you to reach out to the chief individually. And from there, we'll move on. Thank you for the chief's report to the consent calendar. Anybody want to remove anything from the consent calendar? Whoa,
Two.
you got, you want to remove approve the minutes?
No, that part of the consent calendar.
That part of consent calendar.
I'd like to pull number 5 off.
Okay, the surplus of the 5 district vehicles and trailers. Okay, anybody else have anything to remove from the consent calendar? Okay, do we have a motion to approve items 2, 3, and 4 of the consent
I'll
calendar?
move.
I'll second.
Okay, so Virginia moved it, Rod seconded it. Any further discussion on any of those items? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so 2, 3, and 4 are unanimous. And then
I want to
we-
hear it for Casano.
Huh?
I was in the process of swallowing some water.
I know. So
You
I.
caught me.
Oh, I asked if there's anybody not.
He
I didn't hear it
he had
right.
his mouth full booked for,
I did a thumbs
He
up.
lost his jam.
I did.
Okay, all right, item number 5, the resolution approved authorizing surplus to 7 district vehicles and 2 trailers. I believe there's a staff report attached regarding that.
Yeah, I just have a minor question. I wanted to know what about, on page 1 of that report, the 4th item down in the chart, talked about survive alive trailer, and I just was curious what that was.
It's a
Oh, I
public
think talked about it.
education, it's a public education trailer that we've used. For,
Forever.
yeah, safe, you know, the EDIT drills, the exit drills in the home,
Then,
yeah, how to,
that's
yeah,
what,
just,
that's what I thought it was, but then how do we surplus that? Do we replace it? Do we
no,
just?
we're not intending to replace it, but we no longer use it. And, you know, our surplus policy dictates that in order for us to get rid of a fixed asset that had a value of more than, I think it's either $5,000 or $10,000, the board has to formally approve us the ability to surplus it. We will then try and sell it. If we're unable to sell it, then we go down the list of different options for us in the surplus policy. But it's no longer being used and has been sitting idle over at the warehouse for as long as I've been here.
We used to take it to fairs and things like that,
In
right?
schools and things like that.
Okay, and that was my question. Are we gonna keep using it or is it done for?
It's done.
I have a question. So I actually did the survival lighthouse thing when I first got acquainted with the fire district, and it was actually for public education for children, you
Right.
know? And it's a great tool. Are we gonna have this, not this replacement, but another similar trailer or something that we're gonna use for
I will,
kids?
I,
Because that's-
I know we still work with the kids on doing things. I don't know whether they use virtual reality or trailers now, but we're not planning on a trailer replacement.
Okay, because the kids loved it. They would go in and you had it, you know.
Okay, so let's keep the topic to
No, no,
the
no, I know,
surplusing
but-
of the trailer.
Yeah.
So
well, I
if
know,
we
but I mean-
are no longer using the trailer, which
Yeah.
is what I'm hearing,
Yeah, yeah,
that sounds like it meets the definition of surplus. And then we can agendize an item down the
Yeah.
road if we want to about the program.
That's,
Well,
yeah,
I
that's a
think-
good idea, Jared.
If I may interject just a little bit is.
I probably can't stop you, so go ahead.
Well, if you're gonna look at the program for children again, and if this particular vehicle or apparatus was connected to that children's program, it seems to me, maybe I could totally blind and it makes sense that at some point that particular vehicle may be reactivated. If it's gonna be geared towards the same working with kids again. And so I think the surplus is now, and we find out later that, hey, you know,
We could have used
we
it.
could have used it because we're going back in that direction. Doesn't make much sense to me. So, but if we,
I mean, I agree.
I just don't, and so if anything, that I didn't really pull off until we get to that point, to where if the kid program is absolutely in your mind, it's not gonna happen, and that this truck and trailer is not gonna happen with that new kids program, okay, we can just let it go. But if we are, if there's any thought that might happen, then.
And we don't have it, it'd be like, uh-oh.
Maybe an answer there.
So, the district surplus policy for vehicles is 10 years. And that, you look at the year on that Spry Flag house, I don't wanna call it out, because Director Crowley was involved in
Yeah, that was
making that happen.
nineteen ninety-eight.
But it's past the 10-year mark. So if we were to start that program up again, we would likely be buying a new one anyways, because it's outside of the 10-year cycle.
Yeah, but we can not have, we don't have to surplus that just because that's the policy, but we can say, why don't we wait? I mean,
Exactly, but
I,
it was a very,
it's an old
it
trailer.
was a very nice trailer 20 years ago, Director.
I know.
Maybe not so much now.
You just buy a new one.
So, but I have and I will get back to it at the next board meeting. What are we doing that's replacing that right now? I haven't had a request from the program to purchase a new one, but as Chief Werner was saying, it's old and tired and should be.
It is old.
Can you just address that question, your chief superintendent?
I will, yes.
Okay,
I'll move to accept or to, what do you call it? To-
Surplus.
To approve item 5.
I'll second.
okay, so Director Bernstein moved it, Director Crawley seconded it. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, I heard this one very loudly, but I missed all the others. Anybody opposed? Okay, so unanimous approval of item 5 on the consent calendar. And that brings us to item number 6. And I'll hand that to Chief, which is the resolution authorizing the fire chief to purchase 24 SCBA's for Task Force 3. And we'll let the chief discuss it quickly or
I'll discuss it. We'll see if you have questions. We have our 2 subject matter experts here if there are. Normally, I would have included this on the consent calendar, but I specifically wanted to be able to talk about it and share with both this item and the next one. These are not coming out of district general funds. These are coming out of grant funding, and also FEMA in both cases is dictating, replacement fees. So these are replacements for this one in here is replacement of self-contained breathing apparatus. It's done through a cooperative purchase agreement, so it complies with our purchasing policy. The ones we have are well out of date, so it's just a necessary replacement. There's a need on with the folks on the task force to have, protection of their respiratory airway and, IDLH atmosphere is immediately dangerous to life and health. So with that, I'll open it to any questions and probably.
Okay, before we go to questions, can I get a motion to adopt it in a second, and then we'll.
I'd like to make a
I'll
motion.
move. I'll
Okay,
move.
so. Director Solano moved it,
I'll second.
Director Corrali seconded it, and now we can answer the questions. Go ahead.
The context of this, I mean, this seems like a reasonable thing, but I think unfortunately this report didn't really give a context where. So you're saying that this is task force 3 equipment, does that mean the regular firefighters do not use this apparatus?
All of the FEMA cash or everything at the warehouse is available for a local and a regional and a state response prior to going out on a federal response, so.
But these aren't carried on engines and
These
trucks.
are not carried on these are trucks. If for some reason the fire district had a call where they needed to have an excess of hazardous material, equipment, then we would be able to bring that equipment out, to the site, wherever it is. So we have a fair amount of monitors that we maintain on a regular basis, and we have that are nearly the same identical model that we carry on our rigs, and then we have other models that carry nuclear and chemical capabilities that we don't have on our rigs, and all those types of equipment are in the cache.
And
Can I answer the question differently for you,
Okay.
if I may? So every firefighter on the engine and on the truck has an SCBA already. We approved as a board an overall replacement program, I believe, since I've been on
6
board.
months.
So within the last year, 6 months ago. So this is completely separate. This is for the FEMA cache when the trucks go out on a FEMA deployment. Completely separate set of equipment from the SCBA's that are used for day-to-day response firefighters.
okay, well, that relates to kind of my follow-up question, which was, how does this model of the SCBA compare to the models that we are using?
So,
This kind of bad mouths the.
no, so this is, every year FEMA puts out a cash list of what's supposed to be in that $6.8 million of cash. This purchase is directed by FEMA to be made out of supplemental funds because of in 2005, FEMA gave us all this equipment, and then in 2017, they did a report to Congress and said that $2 million of this $6 million cash was approaching end of service life. And FEMA didn't have enough money to give us all $2 million per task force. So they issued a report, and they have a list of items on that report of things that must be replaced with supplemental funds. So every year, based off the grants available from the system, the program office will give us X dollars to replace that. So they gave us X dollars specifically to buy this model of SCBA, and Bertha had to file a extension on the 2021 grant in order to make this purchase, because Scott lost their certification on that model, and they had to re-go through that process. So it was an 18-month process, and it wasn't very happy. So it took us 18 months to get to this point, to put that in front of you to purchase that. And that model is the model that the other 28 teams utilize in the system.
Let me ask the questions behind all this other stuff, and that is, our firefighters, do they have current good SCBA equipment? And do all the members of the task force, will all of them have new good equipment?
Director Bloom has answered that within 6 months, Chief, maybe 12, within 12 months.
12 months.
You guaranteed, and possibly in the last 6 months, the fire board approved the purchase of the newer model SCBA for the 110 line personnel. And that was because of the same thing that we're experiencing now on the task force, that the VAs that we had were old.
So
The
is that,
the difference being that we within our district set our standard for our SCBA's that we want to use as a district. And when they went through that acquisition process, the staff report at the time explained which models we looked at and which manufacturers we looked at, and what the recommendation was, the board approved it. In this particular case, FEMA is designated and said, all 28 teams in the nation are gonna have the exact same SCBA's, and this is the model that you are going to buy, and we, the federal government, paying for it.
So look, do we have any reason to believe that our firefighters do not have good current equipment?
You just approved replacement of it, we have that.
So the
in stock.
answer is, there's no reason to think that.
Yes, our equipment is current and we are in the process of putting into, use the latest, greatest stuff.
And then let me ask about the task force members. Will all the task force members get current equipment, or will some not have
They
it?
have, you carry, the task force is, I don't
It
know,
will
100.
be, everyone that is put in the IDLH will have the proper equipment. So all of the old equipment is being surplus, and we will have no more old equipment, we will only have the new equipment.
We will, but what about?
When you say yes, Mike Director,
So the answer is no, some people are gonna have old equipment until new stuff is bought, is that right?
until this purchase is completed, we will have old equipment on the task force. And it's not even a issue of us wanting it, the manufacturer can't provide it at this point, they're 3 months behind. They're
So
3 months.
once this order is filled though, it will be, everybody will have current equipment. And then I have just one last question, I'm sorry, but I think there's sort of life safety and health and safety implications about this. I read in here about surplusing the equipment. Is it ethical for us to be surplusing equipment that sounds like it's not up to date and not very good?
So on the usefulness of the equipment, SCBA's are required to be tested on an annual basis, which is what we do with our equipment. So all of our equipment is serviceable. It's just coming towards the end of its lifespan. That's why the federal government put together that list. And then on some of the items, so the SCBA's in particular, when we surplus it, because this is we have to follow the district's surplus equipment policy. But if it was funded with federal funds, we have to follow the cooperative agreement as well. And I can tell you specifically with SCBA's, what the federal government asks us to do is drill holes in the actual bottles, so they're no longer serviceable. So we don't sell that particular piece of equipment to another fire department or send it to Mexico or.
So we would surplus it, maybe a scrap metal or something of that sort?
They usually want SCBA's and some of the higher end rescue tools to be destroyed. That's what their surplus is.
Well, that's, reading between the lines, that's what I was thinking needed to be done, but when we were talking about selling it to someone, I was a little concerned about that. So, anyway, thank you.
Relevant that topic, just to add some thinking to it, is there are volunteer departments around the country that probably have 30-year-old SCBA's and would relish the idea of having 20-year-old ones. So you've got to be careful, it's a delicate dance as to what's usable for what purpose and who and in what city, what country, what territory, whatever else.
But when we
Director
get
Solano,
federal
you had a
funds,
question.
it's we don't make that decision, the higher ups in the program office.
FEMA that tells us what we have to do.
Chief, to get to baseline, do we have an air truck that can service these SPCA's?
The task
In
force
our
does not.
fleet, in our fleet,
Menlo Park Fire does not, but there's a county agreement with 3, correct you? 3 air trucks in San Mateo County that will fill us on an incident.
do we need one?
I don't think so. When we had the 2700 Middlefield fire, we had an air truck out there.
Okay. No, it was just,
It's an
We have-
auto aid response.
Yeah, we have fill stations, right now. we're in
as
the
long as it's
process of buying
sufficient
new ones.
equipment, I'm just trying to make everybody safe.
Any final questions on this topic?
I just have a follow-up to our council. Do we have any liability for our surplus equipment when it goes back out into the marketplace?
We should not, depends on the conditions under which we surplus it. If we sell it, our sale agreement will absolve us and have a release of liability. If we're, destroying it and then scrapping it, the agreement with the scrapyard should also have a release included in it. So the answer to your question is no.
And we have those provisions in the surplus agreements?
I don't know that I can give you a blanket answer of yes. I mean, it's a case by case basis. So You know, for instance, when we even donated our fire truck to Maui, that transfer of title included a release of liability. So when I'm involved in a transfer or a surplus of an asset, I don't know, I don't know what our agreements are with auction houses, or I'm not privy to a lot of what the district does with surpluses.
But I was more concerned even about the defibrillator and.
Okay, we're not on that topic,
I know,
so
but-
hold that thought.
I just want to be sure that somehow you are consulted when we are surplusing equipment.
I sometimes am, sometimes I'm not.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to adopt the resolution to allow Task Force 3 to purchase these SCBA's. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have unanimous approval of item 6. And now we can have the same discussion all over again on item 7.
Yes, item 7 is, yes, a very similar discussion. I will say in advance that related to the surplusing of the defibrillators, the federal government is gonna determine where they go and how they're disposed of, not us. So we won't be selling them to anyone. This is again, just a replacement of 2. Coming out of grant funds, and FEMA has dictated to us exactly what we're gonna buy. So with that, questions?
Okay, do we have a motion first?
I'll move. to
And I'll
purchase-
second.
Yeah,
Okay, so Virginia moved item 7, Solano, Director Solano seconded item 7. Any questions? Chief? Go ahead, Jeff.
We would go through this same procedure in terms of surplusing, whether it was federal equipment or our own equipment. Is that correct?
Sure, we still go through our surplus policy, but then the ultimate disposition of the items is determined by FEMA with task force owned items, if that makes sense. The board still has to declare them surplus.
Thank you.
Question.
Any other questions? Okay, we have a motion on the table and a second. All in favor of item 7 for the BFib monitors?
aye.
Opposed? Okay, we have unanimous approval of item 7. My thanks to the task force staff for assisting with those
Yeah,
items.
thank you.
And that moves us on to item 8, which is approve the response to the Grant Bureau report. And might be worth before staff discusses it, just for Virginia to give an update on the process that the finance committee used.
Oh, and basically, because of the issue of internal controls, this came to the finance committee, and I mean, we just really just tweaked some of the responses in terms of the wording, but not, necessarily opposing or, being out there and going against the recommendations or the findings, that kind of thing. And basically when you say, Gary, it's just making sure that the language was okay, and we reviewed the findings and recommendations. And I think the only big change is I suggested that the chief sign the letter so that they know, that the grand jury knows that it's coming from the chief executive officer of the fire district.
And Chief, do you want to, or?
I will,
Anybody
I'm
else
gonna
wants
hand it
to
over to
do it?
Francine. It's, obviously it's had the fingerprints of staff,
Yeah.
the finance committee, and also district council on it, so it takes a village approach to that. So if you're ready, I'm gonna turn it over to Francine for the staff report.
Yep.
And Elaine, who's online if need be.
So, the district, complied with the, San Mateo County, grand jury, which was the second reporting on internal control. And, we responded along with 54 other agencies on the district's current, practices, regarding our internal controls assessment, reporting out to our governing body, as well as reporting out to, the public. And then as part of our response, we were selected to be interviewed, along with, I think it was 24 other agencies or 28 other agencies that were interviewed. And the results of the 28 entities that were interviewed are in the grand jury report. And basically, just to kind of reiterate what's in the staff report, even though the district doesn't have a formal procedure for assessing internal controls. We do assess internal controls. We're reviewing our processes annually, looking at checks and balances within, our finance, within, payments, like, are in compliance with MOU, benefits, with changes made in our payroll system, with how checks are paid to vendors, or how vendors can change payment addresses or, completions. But we don't have it documented regarding what we will do. So what we did is we reached out to a couple of the neighboring agencies regarding their processes, and also did a survey. And what we found is that a lot of the smaller entities don't have documented processes for doing a full assessment of internal controls. So then what we did is we reached out to a couple organizations to see kind of what this process would entail and how much it would cost. One of them being Eide Bailly, our auditor, to see, and we met with them to kind of talk about the process and get a quote. And so what we're recommending as a response to the grand jury is that we do go through a process to identify if there are any, document our internal controls, assess to see if there's any risk, report that out to the board, and then kind of determine if this should be done annually, or if we, do a kind of an internal assessment, at a different frequency. But we do think it would be a good idea to go through the process and formalize it.
Right, because just to be clear, just because it's not formalized doesn't mean that we don't do it.
Exactly.
That, I wanna make that very clear.
Okay, do we have a motion to approve the response, then we can have discussion?
I'll move.
I second.
Okay, so Virginia's moved, we'll reiterate the motion in second when Michelle gets back in the room. Any questions? Go ahead, Robert.
I was just trying to follow up on what Virginia said, that Francine echoed, and if we have it, but it's not documented, how can you follow the pattern of control? And I think that's so important to kind of have it documented, like the menu, so that anyone, if they so desire, if you so desire to look at it, to be able to follow the balancing ball, so to speak.
And we do, just to respond to that, we do have some of it documented. We have
In our
several
audits.
financial policies, several policies within human resources where it documents it. We don't have one policy that documents it all, in one place. It's in kind of policies. So yeah, it would be, helpful to kind of put it into.
Consolidation of the policies to make it an internal control type of policy.
When I said on the grand jury, eons ago, that it same 24 property, but this time it's probably the same agencies. They had, because I went out myself and investigated different entities around, and like I said, they know what they were doing, and then bits and pieces all over, but it wasn't consolidated. So, like the issue still was out there.
Y'all looked at this?
Not the project, I looked at East Arthur, parts of the same.
But I mean, the same issue.
Same process.
Same project, same issues,
Interesting.
same issues, like document control.
It's with the staff.
Page 165.
Director Bernstein.
I was curious to know what the quote was, or the two quotes you got in terms of doing something like this.
Yeah, so, from Eide Bailly, the quote that they had provided was a not to exceed $25,500. And that was kind of broken up into, 6 phases, where they would do, identify the organizational risk, conduct an assessment of existing internal controls to determine whether they adequately address organizational risk, identify controls that may require modifications, prepare a brief report outlining it, provide guidance regarding implementation of new or modified controls, and then a questionnaire to use as reviewing annually. to update anything that needs to be changed.
And-
Yeah.
And that does not include the staff time costs
Exactly, yeah.
associated with it.
Yeah.
Did you
That's
get,
their
did
cost.
did you get the feeling that this was like, this is what it would cost every year to do it? Or that there would be like a one-time
Yeah,
so
setup?
Yeah, so this would be maybe the cost for one time, and then we would have kind of this like, this template on what we would
Like
do
the foundation
annually
for it,
internally. You know, what we kind of just would it was kind of establish the path.
And the other
Just to be
quote,
clear, in this item, the board, you're not being asked to commit the district to this, to authorize these kinds of reports or to engage a consultant, you're not being asked to do any of those things.
yes, we are, the last page,
No, we're not.
it suggests what we're gonna do
recommendation.
and a potential timetable for doing it.
Well, it
But it
says
says-
that if the board authorizes funding in the budget, the district may do this once, and then will, based on that, determine, and with board input, determine what it wants to do later.
You're right,
So
it's not a firm contract, but it's part of the communication that we're sending to the county. And I think it creates expectations. I mean, one of the questions is this something we should be considering every year, or every 5 years, or every 3 years? And that, in some ways, I felt like we were making too much of a commitment in those, that we should have it even more open-ended. Because it wasn't clear to me that we needed to do something like this every
They
year.
really, yeah, and they didn't on page 7. They said, grand jury found through its research that audits have uncovered only about 4% of fraud. I mean, where do they show the data of the 4% of fraud?
I don't believe it was in the report.
No, it's not. And that's what concerns me, and Chuck has a good point. You know, if we're gonna, provide resources for us, is it in there? No, it's
Well,
not.
so,
That's what I'd like to know. I'd like to know where they got this number of 4% and who's or are we gonna call it negligence, or, I don't know. A nice way of saying that they made a mistake. I mean,
I think there's
I
another.
wanna see what the 4% is.
There's another problem with it, in my opinion, and that is, it talks about management doing it. And to me, this is not something that should be done by management, because in almost all the cases they cited of wrongdoing, management was the wrongdoer. And that doesn't make sense. It ought to be the board who takes responsibility. And I'm not saying the board can't do wrong, but the board is the one that's ultimately responsible, and I think that is something, and we had this happen in our district. I mean, the fact is, we paid an attorney a lot of money to do an investigation of what was a lack of control. and so forth.
$60,000 in order to.
Yeah,
And understand that staff's recommendation is that if we will likely come to the board during budget hearings and make a recommendation that we do this one time, and then evaluate the value of it after that. It'll be conducted by an outside consultant. You know, you're right, that the grand jury's report was a little nebulous, it really didn't identify specific items. It felt like it might be prudent, considering the cost, for us to do it one time and see if there was value to it. Let the board weigh in and make a decision on whether we continue to. But there are certainly a number of agencies out there that are declining to do it and don't agree with the grand jury's findings. Yeah, for us, it raised at least enough questions, so
to look at.
we decided it probably would be valuable for us to look at it once. Ide Bailey's, quote doesn't seem too outrageous, but on an ongoing basis, my gut feeling is probably not. And as Steve indicated, we didn't commit to doing anything on an ongoing basis.
So
That's
a
one
comment,
way,
a comment I would make is, so we have a responsibility from the grand jury to respond. So we gotta be
Right.
timely in our response, we're up against, kind of heading towards the deadline on responding. I thought the letter was completely accurate in that it says, assuming that the board includes appropriate funds in the 2025-2026 budget. So the board has not given up its discretion to say, when we do the budget, it says, well, you haven't given us enough facts that we actually want to approve this, and we as a board can make a conscious decision to not approve any further action on this and not approve any further expenditure of staff time.
So I think it's.
I think I'm gonna, so
You may.
I think, yeah, we can kick the can down the road, but I guarantee you the grand jury is making a notation that, and that they will continue to send, whether they can send it next year or not, they will continue to have that in their key, so that if it's not applied with, then they're gonna continue to send these letters. So it may behoove us as an institution to, if you got the funds to comply, to set up the internal process or control system, and it's done. It's absolutely done at that point. We don't need to go back to it every year. The system will be in place. Anybody want to understand at what point in the system certain things are looked at, they can go to the document and tell you, this is where we are within how we control things. And these are the entities that will control certain parts.
Virginia. Go ahead, you're done. I'm sorry. I
No,
wasn't trying to cut you off.
I'm done.
Okay, Virginia.
So I agree with everything that people are saying, but we're here tonight just to approve the response to the grand jury. How we move forward is should be another agenda item, right? It is important, so the grand jury you probably know how this, Robert and I was on the grand jury too. So they're looking at a bunch of organizations, so it's not gonna necessarily be specific to us, but it's a recommendation that's pretty general for the topic they wanna cover. So there is a motion to approve the response, and later on, when we get to future agenda items, if we want to discuss putting together how we can look at making our internal processes more, controls more robust, then let's put that on an agenda item. This has a deadline by the end of September. So we have a motion, Gary, so I'm gonna call for the question, because we gotta get this part responded to the grand jury, and then we can look at the other issues separately.
I stepped away, who made
So
it?
Virginia
I made the
motioned
motion,
it
and
and Rob
seconded.
Solano, Director Solano seconded it. And we now have a call for the vote on the table, and I forget the process for that.
You have to take a vote
You
on
have
it.
to
Take a vote on the.
So I make a motion,
I mean, if everybody just wants to vote on the underlying motion, you don't need to take a vote on Virginia's call of the question, but you may if you.
Are we ready to vote on it, or are there more
No,
questions?
I'd like a question I'd like to ask.
And you should vote on
And we should
Virginia's.
vote on the call for the vote. So, all in favor?
No, there's a second.
Rob just seconded it.
Are you seconding the call for the vote? Okay. So we have a motion, a second to call for the vote, so all in favor of calling for the vote, signify by saying aye. So aye,
Yeah,
opposed?
I'm opposed.
Okay, so the call for the vote was moved and approved, so I will now call for the vote on the approving the response to the San Mateo grand jury. All in favor of?
There is already a motion.
There is, did you motion? and
Yeah, so,
Director
you're
Solano?
calling for, yeah.
We're actually voting on the approval because you called for the vote, the board agreed to vote.
Okay,
So
all
we're
in
now-
favor?
We are now voting.
Aye.
All in favor of approving item 8, which is the response to the San Mateo grand jury, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
nay. And
Okay.
if you could put down my reasoning for.
Well, I said, let me just record the vote first,
Okay.
which is, we have a we have a vote to approve it on a 3-2 basis with Director Bernstein and Director Solano voting against the motion to approve the letter. And now if you want to add something to the record, go for it.
Thank you, Gary. No, I want more data, to inquire, where they're saying that research or audits uncover only about 4% of fraud. And I want a little bit more information. I want who they identified or what agency that they identified this 4% of fraud. Because as Chuck had mentioned, we'll put a lot of, expense into this and, let's get a determination. It may not even be our agency.
Right.
And it's probably not because of all the great job that Francine and her group does.
So what you're, just not trying to put words in my mouth, what you're stating is that you'd like the record to reflect that you voted no against it.
Because I want
You're
more
looking for
information
more information
from the grand jury,
regarding
from
grand
the
jury data.
civil grand jury.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And I'd like to reflect that, I voted no because I felt the letter should be stronger in terms of committing to doing this study.
You think we should commit to it.
All right, that moves us on to proposed agenda items.
Well, before you go on, I have no directions, doesn't seem like we have a direction, but I would like Chuck and Rob comment, reflecting this, some type of either further discussion or at another, next month, pursue this, because we're just kind of just dropping it.
So
I'm
save that-
actually
save
putting
that for
a
item
future
10.
agenda item. I'm actually doing that.
Okay, so it sounds like
Okay.
somebody's going to put that
I'm
as
gonna,
an
yeah,
item
I'm
10.
writing that
Okay,
down, because I think that there's two separate things.
Okay.
Okay,
Right,
so you'll get a chance to do
yeah.
No, no, I did it, I just want to make sure.
Okay.
I'm writing it down
Okay.
right now.
Okay, so we are now on item 9, which is considering whether we're going to place the agenda items that were suggested at last meetings on August 2024 meeting on a future meeting agenda. And as a reminder of the process, we are not going to discuss the item, we're simply getting enough information to decide whether we want to have this on a future agenda. And so the first one being from Director Crawley, the board would like to discuss if the board would like to submit a letter to the San Mateo County Board of Supervisors, give feedback related to housing, as the state was going to try to put on the November ballot an item to repeal California Constitution's Article 34.
So it's not going on the ballot.
34 is 33.
This is 33 is a different thing, not 33. This is Article 34 of the California Constitution.
So does that mean we don't need to have the
No, no,
agenda
no.
item, or you still want?
No, so really I just add, if we want to weigh in on this, I think they're gonna start looking at this next year. They're getting input from the cities. And I wanted to just get input from the special districts that provide essential services that have to kind of work with the cities when they're dealing with development issues. That's all. Which I think it's important that, we weigh in on this because we have to, we may have to like change our numbers, or I just don't know, but mainly
Okay.
just so we weigh in and that if we want to.
And to be clear, we're not trying to decide whether we should or shouldn't do, we're trying to decide whether we're gonna have this on next.
Correct.
on
Oh, yeah,
future
yeah,
agenda.
okay, sorry.
Right. I would like to
Go ahead.
add a little bit more to it.
Sure.
In relationship to the California Fire Code, they speak about different egresses and how many per 20 apartments, where they're only acceptable would be just one egress. And we saw on the,
So let me stop you. So what you're suggesting, sorry.
to add the California Fire Code.
You're
relative to
speaking
egresses.
that you would like to support this because you would also like to introduce in that discussion the California Fire Code items for AD
Relative to
egress.
egresses, with number of apartments.
So your support
He's
putting it on
supporting
the agenda?
Okay.
Yes.
Do we have any other comments? Otherwise, we can just vote on whether we want it on the agenda. No more comments. Okay, so all those in favor of having this item on future agenda, show your support by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Okay,
Was there a motion?
Yeah, it says.
well, is there really a motion? I thought we just vote on each of the items. It wasn't a move motion.
You should have a motion first, if
I'll
there's no
move.
motion, there's no.
Okay.
Okay,
I'll second.
I'll move to.
We have a motion, we have a second, we've had discussion.
Wait,
All in-
hold on,
I'm gonna-
I
I'm
still
gonna
need to
do-
record this, so
So
I got that,
Director,
who's the second?
Director
Thank you.
Solano is the second. We're now having a vote on the motion to have this on the agenda. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed?
I'm opposed. Nay.
Okay, so same vote, 4-1. And Director Bernstein being the nay vote. Okay, the next item so we will put this on a future agenda item, as a future agenda item. The next one is from Director Jones, was consider reopening the discussion on electric vehicles for the district.
The reason when I first got on board, this item came up and it got vetoed down, and I think I myself and I think Virginia may have voted for
We did, yeah.
the use of, at least exploring further the use of electric vehicles. Adding a truck or two, based upon the technology. Because part of what I was asking about the response time was in the reading for some of the calls that try to get an understanding why, what is the other call, or try to understand what's, false alarm, et cetera. It seems like the way what happened is the call comes in, the truck goes out, and you got a full-blown fire engine going out to these calls. And whether that's, in some of these calls, I guess we don't really know what to, until we get there, whether to classify what that call could be, or should be classified at that point. And that's why getting back to the dispatch, it's maybe sometimes they don't know, they just send out the sound and we just go respond. If there can be a way to smaller trucks going out, if that's the case under certain circumstances, and do those trucks have to be gas trucks, or can they be electric vehicle trucks? That because all the negative stuff that it seemed like the trucks stay running, they have to start running, so there's emissions, I guess, inside the fire station, and when they get there, they continue to run. There's more emissions being let go in the atmosphere, and it's about trying to understand. I know that if we were to go the electric truck route, smaller trucks, that reconfiguration of the station would have to take place in order to charge those vehicles. But I think in terms of for the benefits that I see occurring is that the firefighters wouldn't have to be around that kind of fumes, sucking it up every time they go out. And at the number of calls that we have, over 6,000 calls, there's a lot of, the truck is out a lot. And how much emissions coming out of those trucks, and the guys have to breathe, guys and ladies have to breathe on a 24-hour basis. And then that can be a cumulative effects in terms of the health. So that's why I wanted to kind of, us maybe kind of take another look at it, kind of explore, see if we can explore it a little bit further, drive down to see if that would be a viable option to replace, so trucks with from gas to electric. So I don't know. That's,
Do we have a motion to approve this item for the future agenda?
I'll move.
I'll second.
So motion by Director Crawley, a second Director Swan, now discussion on it.
no.
So just my only comment on it is, I feel like us requesting this item is being driven by the board versus being driven by the operations. And I kind of believe that vehicle selection and usage should be driven by the operations side of the house, not the board. With that said, I think there are likely areas, to your point, where electric vehicles might make perfect sense. Perhaps not necessarily the response vehicles, but other support vehicles and other things we do. But I kind of wonder if this isn't better to be handed simply, rather than being a board agenda item, be handed back to the chief for a future staff report about where electric vehicles might fit into our fleet management strategy versus making it a board topic.
Well, I think, let me put it this way, I get that part in terms of understanding the chief coming from operations, whether it makes sense or not, but there has to be a commitment, I think, somewhere on the board to making it happen. Maybe we can't get to that decision until we get it from, get the information from the chief. I get that part. It's a chicken and egg thing going on here. And so only thing I wanna, sure, because this thing came up when I got on the board, 6 years ago almost. And we got, it got eliminated for reasons that I don't think we forgot, it's been so long ago. But, so I'm bringing it up again,
Okay.
so
I'm just stating what kind of my view on it, so.
Sure, no.
Chuck, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Robert brings up good points. I think these are things that should be discussed. But it seems to me also, these are things that are part of strategic planning. And in fact, these things relate to emissions, they relate to speed, response speed, they relate to a number of different things. Robert referred to the size of the vehicles and whether they could, avoid traffic and so forth. And I think these are things that we should be considering as part of the strategic plan. I'm gonna vote for it because I think it's worth finding out about, but I think there's a bunch of stuff like this that we should be finding out about. We never went back to find out, for example, about solar panels, and there's a whole bunch of things that we should be looking at as an organization. And I don't think we should be looking to the staff to do this, because in general, the staff doesn't look forward. They look at today, and that's their job, is to look at and respond to today. So in any case, I think it would be good for us to get a report on this.
And for clarity, that's your point of view, the staff doesn't look forward.
Of
not
course, it's
necessarily
my
the-
point of
the
view.
shared
I'm not
point of
here
view of
to
the board.
express your point of view or anybody else's point of view.
Virginia.
So, I am supporting this because I agree with you, Garrett, we have to look about in a broader sense, for maybe our whole fleet, or, all of our, utility vehicles too. Let me just say this, Mark, this is before your time. The deal that we had in 2019 is probably not gonna be the same, or we're not gonna have that, the agreement that, oh God, what is it?
Opportunity.
Robert, yeah, the opportunity from the manufacturer won't be the same. But that doesn't mean that we shouldn't at least look at it in a more broad sense that Gary suggested. So, and then you can
Been a few years.
kind of, well, it's been, I'll tell you, it's been 5 years.
Yeah, no,
Right.
it's been a few years.
Yeah,
You know, we
so-
should go back to it.
So anyway, that's why I'm supporting this.
So I think we had a motion and a second. Is
Yeah.
there any further discussion? Who is the motion?
I'm from,
Corrali, seconds, Director Solano.
Okay,
I just had one quick addendum to what Virginia said, and that is, we got a report from John Werdinger that we perhaps bought our last diesel fire engine,
Exactly.
and that we'll never be able to do that again. I don't think that's true, but
he was actually referring to the big rig trucks, not fire engines.
okay.
and I'm looking at this in a very broad level.
I just wanna
that
make it
includes
clear.
your-
You're right, sorry.
What was discussed
You're
had
right.
nothing to do with fire
So
trucks.
it would be
Had
for
to do
the
with-
fleet and for what Gary's talking about, because I think you'll find different answers, and there may be support for one type of vehicle and not for the other, or for both.
So we have a motion and a second. All in favor? Opposed will be myself, nay. And so that, I can still vote differently than the rest of the board, so that motion passes and we'll put it on a future agenda item. And then, Michelle?
The city of Menlo Park Police Department did a staff report on their Tesla vehicles, and it's on their website. So that might be something we want to attach.
Okay, we will I will work with the chief on appropriate staff work and at the appropriate time schedule this on to the
Don't have to
agenda.
reinvent the
I
wheel.
will, I will just share with you, I've been already looking at this, that so much has changed in the 6 years since we were looking at that Rosen
Correct.
audit.
Oh, of course.
There's manufacturers of fire truck that looks just like our.
I'm gonna
fire
cut you
trucks.
off, we're not gonna talk about
Yeah,
it.
this is
Okay,
gonna,
talk about it.
The
Mark,
top-
this is
the-
a future agenda.
The topic is closed for
Yeah.
tonight,
This
so.
is some foreshadowing.
No, we're done talking about, we're on to the next
Oh, you did.
item.
We need to get a process, I don't understand what the process is. You're gonna bring it back on the agenda.
Right.
At some point,
Yeah,
not next year, sometime soon.
yeah, I'm not going to, I won't rope it up just because I don't agree.
Yeah,
I'll still put it on the agenda.
I'm sitting next to you, I won't let you.
You guys find it out afterward, all right, after we're done.
So the process is, we bring back, we talk about, assigning to the, for
Well, that's what the board
We're making an
wants.
agenda item and then
Yeah,
we'll
that's
decide
the
what
board
path,
wants to do.
what path the board wants to take.
Yeah.
Either further research, go buy one, do whatever.
Okay, so the next
Okay.
one is mine.
Let that dog
The
go.
next
away.
one is mine, Gary.
As much as I don't agree, I won't make it go away. Okay, go ahead, Bridget.
So I'm gonna, so Gary, this is to, have this dispatch thing, this reinstating that as an ad hoc, I'm gonna just remove it because actually as the board president, I think you can establish an ad hoc committee if you wanted to do that.
Okay, so you're removing your request.
Yeah, because I think if it became an issue, you can establish, an ad hoc committee for this, or we can, fold it into the, I mean, whatever, so I'm just gonna remove that.
Okay, so that item's been removed.
Okay,
All right, so we are now on to new proposed agenda
Yeah.
items.
so I
Which is,
do have
again, as a
one.
reminder, we're just listing them, we're not going
Yes.
to discuss them.
So I have one, which is basically what we were talking about, the internal controls.
Okay,
So basically to put on the agenda, how, or should we be looking at, or how should we be looking at making our internal controls process more robust so that the internal controls or the policies that could theoretically make up an internal controls policy can all be consolidated into an internal controls policy. Does that make sense?
so could I just simplify it to
Yeah.
continue the discussion of internal controls that we started as part of the grand jury response?
Yeah, but really the agenda item is whether or not, or how, or whether or not we want to, consolidate the policies that we have for internal controls and put it under one consolidated internal controls policy, which is
So the agenda topic is, should we have a single consolidated internal
internal
controls
control
policy?
policy, yeah.
I thought the grand jury was talking about finance. Were they referring to finance,
No, internal controls,
to operational internal?
it's all, yeah,
Everything.
yeah, but it's under the R,
It's a very generic,
yeah,
broad blush without necessarily, not even specific to our agency,
Right.
just broad brush. So, okay,
but I
so
mean, since the staff has already started looking at this, we might as well put it on the agenda.
it's fine, so I have it documented, Michelle's notes can
And that
concur.
makes sense.
Should we have a single consolidated internal controls policy is the agenda item?
No.
Okay, other new agenda items?
Do we have to vote on that?
No,
Next time.
Oh, sorry.
any other new agenda items? Okay, so I will close number 10, we'll go to committee reports. Starting-
Ask for a quick question, just, in this, again, getting used to the new process. At some point in time in the process, we need to understand what items that are gonna be on the agenda that have been just approved, what the level of staff engagement and staff work is gonna be. And trying to make sure we ask the right questions, so whoever's asked for this item to make sure we're gonna hit the mark. At what point in the process does that occur?
I think I can tell you, like on the electric vehicle ones, what I will do is meet with you when we are setting future agendas. And we will agree on kind of, hey, this is the spirit of the discussion, what the board was asking for. And this is, kind of how much time do you need to produce that?
Okay.
And when will that be produced to be ready to have a discussion? And if we can't come up with a reasonable level, then we'll just put it on the agenda for an open discussion without a full staff.
That sounds fair. Thank you.
Is that a fair representation, Steve, of the way we
Totally
envision
fine.
the policy?
Sure.
All right. Thanks for asking that clarification. It will continue to take us a while to get used to this approach. I think to the chief's comment here, we could probably be a little bit more efficient in being specific when we get to the second discussion. So what was items in item 9, to be a little more specific about exactly what the director requesting it wants to see from staff.
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay. And I think that will help you and I both make sure that we hit the mark.
Well, of course, should before that happen, should it maybe go to one of the committees first to kind of pass through? See if
Well, that's, we can decide as a board is how do we want to pursue the item? But we need an initial view of initial staff report that talks about it to determine should that go off to a committee or not go.
I was just gonna suggest, in some ways, since we voted this, we've all taken responsibility for them. I think the identity of the original proposer is not, doesn't matter anymore.
That's not the relevant, it's not.
Because I may have approved it for a different reason and so forth. What I was gonna suggest is maybe as a courtesy, you just send the wording of the proposed item to the proposer just to see if they have anything to add. But I think these things ought to be as broad as they possibly could be, because we don't know how broad the discussion is gonna be.
Well, that's the point I was trying to make, was that it's my job as board president, working with the chief to put these up in agenda, to bring forward the spirit of the board discussion in representing the agenda item. Whether, and as I mentioned, I'm the one, it's like, whether I agree or disagree doesn't matter. It's what was the spirit of the discussion, and how do we bring that forward to have enough adequate staff work done to address the issue? And then certainly if it's going to be a massive amount of staff work, then my recommendation will generally be, then let's go have another board discussion on it before we commit undue resources to it. Let's have an initial discussion, we can do more work on it. I don't think every item on our board meeting agendas, once it's been voted and approved, we can have an initial discussion at one meeting and have a continued discussion at another. We don't have to always conclude every item in a single meeting. I think some of these things we end up doing that because we have deadlines and, you know, we have processes we have to meet, such as the grand jury, the buying equipment, you know, we have a time element to that.
Well, I think also the word discussion means we're gonna talk about it, not we're going to decide something or have a resolution about something.
I totally agree. I think that's the spirit of the Lake EV discussion, is not to have the chief come up with a recommendation to buy 5 fire engines. It's to talk about the merits of where it makes sense, where it doesn't make sense to fit EVs into our fleet management strategy. That fair representation? Okay. Thanks for that input. Okay, committee reports. The gentleman on my right is recognized as the Human Resources Committee Chair.
Oh, well, thank you, Mr. President, and Robert and I met, and we spoke of an evaluation for our general counsel. And thank you for your form, Francine, your staff prepared a form that we'll discuss at a later date with the entire board in closed session.
Okay.
All right, and let me see.
So let me just make sure I understand. So I know you've discussed it, I know you have a form. Are you going to, as chair of the HR committee, initiate the process of conducting the annual GC review? Is that the summary of it? So the board
Well,
should
we're gonna-
expect to hear from you.
Well,
Similar to-
Robert's and I recommendation was to forward this to the full board for closed session, right, Robert? Okay, so
Forward the format of it and the
the
process.
format and the process.
Okay, got it.
So it's all done in closed session.
Okay,
And then-
so Michelle, just to know that we'll have to figure out a closed session where we can have a discussion about the board's process for the GC review.
Could I ask a question about that? To our council, is that an appropriate closed session meeting to discuss a process?
Completely.
Pardon me?
Yes, absolutely.
And then, we also discussed the paramedic program.
Commendation, the
Huh?
commendation program.
Paramedic program, you said.
And
Yeah, the paramedic program.
no, the recognition program.
Oh, well, recognition program too. And that was a
That's okay.
questionnaire
Commendation.
that was done by staff again. And then, the chief also presented the paramedic program that he wanted to institute. So those were the 3 things.
Okay. Is there any action
Thank you.
for the board?
Nancy,
Is there any action for the board relative to your commendation discussion?
we were gonna,
We're gonna bring the survey back.
forward it to the full board after it was finalized.
Okay, so
They
that's
gave
work in
us some
progress.
sug- Yeah, they still gave
That's
us
fine.
some suggestions.
Okay, thank
Robert,
you.
want to add anything?
No, I think you.
We good?
Yeah.
Thank you.
So facilities report.
I think, other than what the chief presented to you, regarding Station One, we continue to talk about that. We also talked about looked at the priority list that the facility committee, put together a couple months ago. They're checking out each one of those items such as facility, let's see, the warehouse, Station 77, as well as kind of a new thought, I can't think I think John had brought up this program that kind of looked at each one of the fire stations to try to understand, give a clear picture of where Station was 5 would, if we were to move it, where it actually, possible locations that might be advantageous, because right now it's a very,
Take a risk.
almost like a lost landlocked, residential lot kind of area, so, which is very helpful, and very insightful, but maybe one day we can, remove that, take that thing on road, send it to the board, take a look at the other possible sites where Station 5 might be located. I was quite pleased with that program. We talked
Can I
about-
just add something to that item?
Yeah.
Just, and just for clarity, it was a software program that did mapping technology that measured response time, distances and such. What that allows staff to start doing is putting on an opportunistic long-range view of potential properties that might come available or come in the market over the next X number of years. So we're not saying go rebuild Station 5.
Right now.
We're saying we needed some information on possible locations that would support Station 5 in in the districting approach for the different districts. And to take a long range view to be opportunistic if real estate becomes available that we should consider. Under the context of what the facilities committee discussed, which is if we're not optimistic over the next few years, we may not have optionality when we need it 10 years from now, as an example. So it's trying to take the longer range view on our facilities. Similar to the optionality we picked up by buying houses next door to
Yeah.
historical
Yeah.
stations.
It's
and that-
basically planning.
Planning, yeah. So,
Ask
sorry.
a question about the committee. Are you guys getting information about that whole area with the big Stanford expansion and all that? Are you hearing what's planned for that area? Because the access in and out of there is really getting very jammed.
Crowded.
You're
Yeah,
talking about Station 5 specifically.
yeah.
No, we haven't talked about it, whether that, we haven't looked at the mapping that was done preliminarily to see if that, I don't know if that's in our service area. It might be, I'm not sure.
That's something you might want to ask about because that place is just be turned into a maze down there. With all those new buildings and so forth.
Are you thinking District
In
77?
Redwood City- in
Somewhere
Redwood
in
City.
River City, yeah, I think it's.
Or you're talking the North Fair Oaks?
I'm talking about the North Fair.
Oh, okay.
Well, that is the closest
Okay.
station in North Carolina.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah, so,
the Stanford part I thought was in Redwood City.
yeah, that's.
That is, but the traffic now is starting to
Oh, I
come
see
through.
what
to
you're
North-
Yeah, so that's some of what it was looking at. It was looking at where the major traffic arteries are, where expected additional response is likely. And then trying to take into account the traffic calming devices that the city has put in over there, which make it difficult for the engine to get to and from that, and the fact that little things like, hey, they can't really go from, kind of where the Shell station used to be, come up to Middlefield. There's nowhere for cars to get out of their way. So that's not a good route for them. And just the same, they have trouble covering District 77 from there. But if it's moved to different locations, then you might get better coverage of additional districts. So it was looking at all those kinds of aspects. Pretty cool software developed specifically for this purpose.
So I think that, what Gary just got to saying, and I think there was some other discussions going on, but I think overall, we had a good meeting. I think Bring it down, go a little bit more, back next month.
Yeah.
Anything
No, the only thing I would say is I think it just continues to support the theme of long-range facilities planning and that, you know, if we wait until we need the new facility, we're too late. You know, relative to
Right,
land,
that's
and
right.
that's not always the case. It is the case in the case of Station 5 because there's no available property for us to use. We don't own the four houses next to it, as an example, so. Okay, finance.
Yes, so not a whole lot to say, because we covered a lot of the things today for approval, the things for approving that. But I do want to bring your attention to the consolidated summary statement from CAMP. So that was the statement month ending July 31st, 2024, and that current yield is still 5.44%. So this month is like $602,909.60 for cash dividends of income. But the one thing that we did talk about, I don't know, is Elaine still on? Nancy? Yeah. So I mean, it's, and he can chime in if he wants to, but it's pretty simple. That the yield curve might be normalizing again, so we might be, so if there's money that's moved around, like not next month, but you know, who knows, maybe in the last quarter of the year, you know, that's just something that we've all kind of prepared for. So as the yield curve normalizes, so the longer term is a higher yield, then just take, you know, that the money movement might be happening.
And we just did, I think it was right before our electrification, but Elaine had initiated a move.
Yeah.
And had reached out.
Do you know how much that was? By any
You know,
chance?
I just have to check.
I mean, so this was, yeah, something like that, like 10
I
million.
think it was a $10 million
Yeah,
shift.
so that was what the finance committee talked about in preparation for this kind of thing, so we've already kind of planned for this so that, but this yield curve normalizing is, you know, gonna maybe.
But and the only thing I would add is I think the key thing for the board to just prepare itself for is that 602,000 is going to head
It's
down.
not gonna, yeah, it's not gonna
going
be
to
like
sus-
this.
It's not gonna sustain itself at that level.
Right.
It will go down because
Right.
interest rates are going down.
They're gonna change.
And
The yield curve.
even whether we're a little longer term on the duration curve or short term, the state laws restrict on how far out we can go.
Right.
So we're relatively, by my description, we're relatively short term for everything. And
Yeah.
so we're going to see the negative impact.
But we're not
of the
gonna
interest
see
rate
this
shift.
cash dividend income number to be the same
It's
as
gonna
time goes
decline.
on.
It's gonna decline.
It'll
It's not going to
it'll
get better.
decrease, yeah.
So it was September 10th that we transmitted this to.
Yeah, so it's like right after the finance committee meeting, so that's really the big.
Elaine would like to say something.
Okay, hi Elaine.
Hi, good evening, everyone. So just to clarify, look, we actually talked about two things in the finance committee meeting about about the normalization of the yield curve. First things first is, you know, the allocation between the LAIF account and our CAMP account. Because right now, most of our liquid portfolio or liquid investments is actually allocated to the CAMP because it's actually yielding a lot more than the LAIF account. Right now, it's 5.41 versus LAIF's 4.57. But as Director Kirali was saying, you know, we were discussing about, you know, switching, you know, the funds around. Once, you know, we actually, you know, start seeing, you know, the yield curve to disinvert, meaning it's normalizing, meaning long-term, you know, rates are actually, you know, higher than the short-term rates. That's one thing. So in the future, you know, it may not be now, it may be like 3 months, 6 months, or even a year from now. You may see us we may see us, you know, start like switching off our CAMP account into our LAIF account. And the other one, you know, that we're talking about is, you know, switching, you know, some of our liquid portfolio to our managed account, which is typically, you know, the longer term ones. We already deployed, you know, $10 million, additional $10 million, you know, as part of, you know, the discussions in the past. And, you know, that additional $5 million that, you know, we were talking about, that's as part of, you know, the analysis that we did with the 15% cushion. We actually already deployed, you know, that, you know, piece of it, like this week. That $5 million we transferred, you know, $5 million of, you know, our CAMP money to the managed account. Because, we are actually really anticipating that the interest rates would go down. I think tomorrow is the announcement. So it's almost, certain, we'll never we'll never know for sure, but it's almost certain that they're gonna cut down the rates. So we actually we went proactive with that. So we actually deployed additional $5 million, to our managed account, so it can be, invested into a more longer term like interest rate, so we can lock in those rates already.
Thanks, Elaine.
Thank you.
So, I mean, the interest rate issue is important because the amount of money we've got it being invested.
Right.
So that's why Gary and I and Elaine and with Francine, we're keeping an eye on this with the chief.
Yeah.
That's all I've got.
Okay, so is there a backup to where, once this meeting takes place, I think I heard Elaine say he's gonna move it somewhere else?
The managed account,
Yeah, in the managed
that's
account.
It's all basically looking at from a money market versus a managed
short-term
portfolio.
versus longer-term
And
investment
the
portfolio.
managed account is longer term,
Right.
so by switching to the longer term, we're trying to get rates locked in.
Right.
But generally speaking, even the rates we're locking in are lower than the rates that
Uh,
we've been
the-
seeing on the very short
short-term
term.
rates,
Right.
yeah.
We had a short-term benefit that's benefited us to
For a
millions of
long time,
dollars
yeah.
now for a number of months.
Right.
But with the interest rates declining, there's just going to be some level of decline in the
So
returns
you
of the
normally,
portfolio.
yield curve will go up like
But
this.
did I miss the question?
No, you got it. I was trying to get past something else.
Sure.
Understanding in whatever that other account, that managed account, is the interest rate would be lower, if I heard you correctly.
No,
There.
the interest rate environment in general is gonna change. And
Okay.
so let me just say, so Robert, like a normal yield curve will go up, like longer term.
Right.
Now it's like this, so the shorter term is longer, right? But that's going back to
It's inverted.
normal, right?
That was the inversion. that
Right,
was
that's
mentioned. It's
in the inverted yield curve. That's, so anyway,
So this-
so we were trying to move. We were trying to take advantage of the short-term rates that were higher than a long-term rate, but
Right.
the environment's gonna change.
Right.
So we're planning to move some of the money to
We
the
started-
longer-term investment
Right.
portfolio to
Shorter interest rate.
no, so that, because so as interest rates go down, that yield curve that's gonna be normal, the long-term rates are gonna be at some point higher than the short-term rates. Does that make sense?
Another way to think about it, is
Right.
we're trying to,
Sorry.
we're trying to lock in higher
So-
rates for as long as
As
we
much as,
possibly can.
yeah, as long as we
Yeah,
can,
but sometimes when you do that, you do give up some short-term gain, so
which we
if the feds
talked
were, if the
about.
feds were to delay the reduction of the interest rates again, which has happened now multiple times, the short-term rates stayed much higher. So those who procrastinated and moved did better.
Right.
Those that started moving based on what they thought was gonna happen 6 months ago, with the feds reducing rates, actually gave up some returns. So it's
And so-
imperfect science at best.
But we did make a conscious effort to at least maybe give up a little bit of some of the
Sure.
return because we're thinking that the rates might go down, but we've got enough in there to still get this $600,000 plus dividend income per month. So we're still kind of, as Gary said, take advantage of the long-term rates as long as we can.
Well, in a week, we should have some idea of whether it's going to drop 50 or 25.
We'll see.
No.
Okay, I'm going to
Okay.
close that committee report
Does
discussion.
that help?
And we're going to move on to our liaison reports, and I can start with Town of Atherton. I don't have a lot to report citywide other than they continue to work on their housing element. And properties continue to come on the housing element, come off the housing element. They've started having some special meetings of the board with the public, and I did not attend those. The one thing that I did do as a resident of Atherton is I was on the citizens committee, which was the search process or the hiring process for a new sergeant in the police department there. And it was interesting to participate as a community member in their panel with all the candidates, and gave me some really interesting insight into how they conduct their search for kind of that, what I would call almost the Harvard's how you achieve equivalent level. how they do their interviewing process. So I was doing it not as a board member, just as a resident of Atherton. Turned out to be an interesting process with some interesting lessons learned about how they do recruitment processes. So that is all I have to report out of town about. And that leads us to Robert for the city of East Palo Alto.
Well, for the city of East Palo Alto, I was in the meeting, not in the city of East Palo Alto, in the city of Palo Alto, that is affecting the city of East Palo Alto, and that is the airport expansion that the city of Palo Alto is trying to add another total of almost 200 feet to the end of the runway currently, which will impact going into the already Bayland Preserve, which is found out from the consultants that the city of Palo Alto have to get the voters have to unrestrict that particular area for wildlife. And that's gonna be pretty much a dogfight to get the voters to get that expansion. They wanted to be able to bring in, make some improvements, expand the runway, but the flight pattern still would be the same. There was complaints about planes circling, which they do, because I live right in the flight plan area where they circle. They have expanded their flight school, which added more students, more flying, and they have midnight runners. They come to the airport, take off around 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and, you know, planes like some of them on their last leg. So the upshot is that it sounded like a majority of the council members there were 5 different options. And the option 1 was to make improvements, but not expand the airport at all. Just improve the landing and takeoff zone, because they wanted to get the bigger planes to, airplanes. I'm not an aviation kind of guy, so I don't know, but they have 1 step bigger planes that can, almost like jet planes that can land. That's where they want to go, and that would bring more pollution. Right now, there's a lot of noise. They have leaded gas, they run off leaded gas, leaded gas, and so that all that fumes and all that and that excess gas when it comes out of the tailpipe, they would be flying over East Palo Alto, was a direct target for that. So there was a lot of it was about 92 people that spoke last night. There were a lot of folks.
Yeah.
And luckily I didn't go in person, I just stayed in Zoom and watched it all and made comments from that from that venue. But anyway, they still gotta go back and they're gonna vote on it. But they look like the sentiment in overall, because I don't know if people around 2010 when they had a crash over in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
And that's the fear now is another crash. It's not a matter if it's gonna happen, it's just not gonna happen.
That was the one into the daycare.
It was in the daycare, it was in their, part of one house. So the fear is that at some point it's gonna happen, especially if they start bringing in more planes and more traffic. Because they wanna increase the number of planes, coming into that area by expanding the runway, so. Hopefully it's in their hands, but the city council members, spoke, against that extension and, like I say, it was 90 some folks speaking, so.
Does the city of Palo Alto own the airport? Is
Yeah,
there?
Yes.
it's their municipal,
There, but it's,
it's like the San Carlos.
yeah,
They
it's
own- the
controlled
city
by the
owns it.
city.
Yeah.
Once they make the expansion, the
A.
FAA will have control over the process at that point, and they will lose control.
Yeah.
They're gonna have to, you know, right now, currently, they get $31 million a year on operation of that site, so,
Interesting.
you know,
Okay,
but that the environmentalists, once they collaborate over that.
Hold on.
interesting. Okay, City of Menlo Park?
Well, let me just say, one of the proposals also was to close the airport and turn it all into a park, so.
That ain't gonna happen, that 31 million, you let that go. Let that walk.
There's no mental park report.
Okay. County San Mateo District 3 and 4.
Yes, so after our last meeting, our last board meeting, and we watched that great after action video where I actually called up Warren Slocum, who's the board president for the Board of Supervisors, to let him know that this great report had come out and, you know, we had just gotten the draft of the after action report, which he'd actually already seen. But anyway, so I thought that it might be interesting for us to go to one of their meetings to present the video in a more condensed version. I've talked to Mark about this. And Warren loved that idea. And he also was wondering, I mentioned to the chief that if we could kind of have, I guess, the investigation drafts or well, even a final by that time in November, whether or not we would even have that done to present to the board. So this Middlefield Road property in North Fair Oaks is in Warren's district too, so he's very interested in, you know, having us there, and so hopefully the chief's made contact with his office.
I did.
Okay,
I haven't heard back, but.
oh yeah, so
The day we
I'll,
talked, yeah.
yeah, so that's, we're looking at sometime in November,
Anything
that's all
else?
I have.
And pre-hospital, I think I heard they canceled.
Oh, they canceled.
Okay,
Except the chief, didn't you have an executive board meeting or something?
he talked about
I did.
Yeah,
Share that.
yeah,
Yeah.
chief's right. I mean, but the entire board didn't be.
When have
I have no idea. Robert, don't kill the messenger.
Yeah, yeah, good long-term memory to know that.
Forget it.
All right, number 13, anything to report on the
No.
E-Prep?
No, we're
Okay.
still working on it.
No report on that. Reports or any other requests of directors? Yep,
I just wanted to make just point people's attention to the report that came out about the fire in Hawaii and Maui, which was very, very negative, very critical of Maui, basically said that there were no warnings at all issued. And I say this because this is the story that we hear over and over and over again, that these emergency agencies, for whatever reason, I don't know why, but they don't sound the warnings that they have. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that they may have said that that most of the warning system wasn't functioning anyway. There was only one functional alarm there, but they didn't sound it in any case. And I say this because it's something I'm really worried about in our district. And I don't want to call it emergency preparedness because it's not about emergency, it's about disaster preparedness or something else. But I believe, need a warning system, and we need something functioning, and we need people who are willing to sound the alarm when there's a reason for it. So I think it's an unmet need for the district.
any other,
Just two quick things. One, with the Palo Alto Airport situation, that's gonna run into once again, our rescue responsibilities on the bay, using our airboats in Task Force 3 because of the marshy area. So I had notified the chief, and we had spoken a little bit about that, and he assured me that he was following it, you know, relative to what our rescue responsibilities. And I got a CC email that was sent to NSU, our congresswoman, from a Mary Pinnell. And should I read this into the record, or should I just give it to you, Michelle? It talks about that the Ravenswood School District has a parcel. Maybe I should read the thing into the record, because it was to NSU, but then She CC'd it to me.
Okay.
Is she in East Palo Alto?
Hmm?
Is she a Ravenswood School District resident?
No, she's a Menlo Park resident.
Oh, okay.
But she sent this to Anna Shu and she CC'd me because I was on the fire district.
Oh, okay, I was just trying to.
She goes, "Hi Anna, I met you years ago, but I'm sure you wouldn't remember me. I used to live in Foster City for many years ago. I have always voted for you over the past years. I moved to Menlo Park, Suburban Park to be exact. I'm very concerned about the new affordable housing that's being proposed at the edge of Hedge Road. 88 affordable apartments are being proposed to build on the former site of Flood School with only one entrance and exit. I realize we need affordable housing, and I realize Ravenswood School District wants to make good use of their property, but I don't think it should be at the expense of present homeowners in Suburban Park. Our neighborhood was built with limited traffic going in and out of this development. The school that was there was for kids that lived in the neighborhood. Is there anything you could do to force the developer to add another entrance and exit to this property for the safety of all concerned? Another entrance and exit could be built along the frontage road by Life Moves. This would take some thought and design. Teachers could go right down Van Buren and onto the overpass at Willow Road and straight to work. It would be great for these people that are going to rent these apartments. It would definitely cut down in time to get to work by a significant amount of minutes. Bay Road has become very congested and is used as an alternate route to 101 if traffic is bad. As my representative, I hope you would be able to do something to migrate this matter so our neighborhood would not bear the brunt of the whole apartment development traffic, entrance and exit. Thank you, Mary Pennell, 343 Hedge Road, Menlo Park. Okay, I'll provide you with it, Thank you. That's all I have.
All right, any other reports or requests of directors? Okay, that brings us to the president's report, and I have nothing on my president's report today. So we will therefore adjourn tonight's meeting at 8:54 p.m.
Great, thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you everyone for attending.
So Ron, why did they cancel the really not enough?
Excuse me?
Why did they cancel the ALS meeting?